Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews. And yes, I'm back. We're getting back into horror movie reviews. I'm getting back on that horse. We're going to try and get back to some sort of semblance of normal. I don't know what my release schedule is going to be, but it's going to be something. So I kind of wanted to get back on the horse here, and I wanted to come up with something that was a little bit of a doozy, and I inadvertently stumbled across one with this movie that I'm reviewing. It's 2019's A Night of Horror, Nightmare Radio. Now, in the time that I've done this channel, and I've warned everybody that this review might get out into the weeds just a little bit here, but there's a reason for that. When I first started this channel, I didn't realize how much I'd have to learn. I mean, I already had a good basis of knowledge of horror movies, but it was just, it's one of those things where the more you learn, the more you realized how little you actually know. And this is a prime example of that. If anybody comes to me thinking that I am the end-all, be-all horror movie expert, I got some real surprising news for you. That just simply is not the case. I have, I'm a fan. I'm a fan, and I watch a lot of movies, and I do some research when I have the ability to. But, okay, so here's the reason I'm getting into all this. I always had the assumption that anthology horrors were just anthology horrors. And I've come across enough now to know that there are distinct differences between them. Typically what you have with an anthology horror movie is you have a binding segment, and then you have segments surrounding it, micro segments that kind of, flit in and out. Sometimes they're arranged differently. Sometimes they're a little bit more clever. But I think that there's really two main categories I've found. You have anthology horrors and you have compilation horrors. Now, I've had to kind of differentiate between the two here, and here's why. I think of anthology horrors as movies that were designed from the beginning of every single production stage for the cohesive end product. And what I mean by that is a movie like Southbound or Creepshow, where you have maybe different directors, different writers, and so forth, but they all start from square one with this project in service of the final theatrical release. And then you have compilation horrors. And I've seen a few of these now, where you have directors that have had short films and they've made the festival circuits, they've done what they needed to do, and then they basically get contacted by a distributor or a production company that wants to include their short segment in with their feature-length thing, and then they sometimes write a binding storyline to kind of flit in and out between them. But the fact that the short film exists in the first place is completely ancillary. It just was picked up and slapped into this like a piece of a jigsaw puzzle, just kind of crammed in there. And most times, that doesn't work. Watch If You Dare, just an absolute crap fest. Strange Events, even worse in some regards. There were one or two segments of Strange Events that was actually pretty decent. So, when I kicked this movie on, I knew that it was going to be a compilation horror, not an anthology horror, so I was kind of bracing myself for something that it just wasn't going to be very good at all. It was basically going to be, one thing I described Strange Events about was that, I didn't see the reason for it. One thing I said was that, some of the segments were not that great at all. Some of them were mediocre. One in particular was great. And I said, it was basically a cultivated YouTube playlist of horror short films. And at that point, why bother? Just go and find a YouTube playlist of horror short films. And that was the stance I took until I watched A Night of Horror, Nightmare Radio. And this threw me for a loop because it was a compilation horror that was actually done well. As far as the notion of taking an existing product that has already been made, maybe got a few laurels at some festivals, and slapdashing them into an entire hour-and-a-half long project until it's done, and then you can release it. To me, it feels lazy. But that's the one thing about Night of Horror, Nightmare Radio that I can say is it's not lazy. First of all, the binding segment of Nightmare Radio, which was directed by Nicholas and Luciano Onetti, was actually not bad. I mean, the acting was kind of so-and-so, but the fact that it actually had a script and had an actor and had some decent segments and caused the, through the voice of the DJ there, to go back and forth between these segments.
I'd like to remind you, dear listeners, that I am always here to listen to you, waiting for you to share your supernatural experiences. And I'm sure you're all in your homes listening to the sound of the rain rattling against the windows.
It's a lot more effort than I saw out of Watch If You Dare and Strange Events. That was just, those two in particular were as low effort as it can possibly be as far as why we are watching these series of short films, just from a narrative standpoint. And this actually managed to provide a narrative standpoint that made some sense. We had a DJ that was announcing all this to us. We had some sort of, even if we didn't have a central theme between them, we at the very least had a reason to be watching this, and like I said, a narrative reason to go through these short films. And of the short films, as far as the compilation goes, they were well picked. I don't think that there was any of these movies that I didn't like. Some of them were okay. Some of them were just on the slight plus side of average, but some were amazing, and I had never seen before, and I was really grateful for it. So in this, we have the main segment of Nightmare Radio. We also have Postmortem Mary, directed by Joshua Long. A Little Off the Top, directed by Adam O'Brien.
Hair like yours only comes around once in a blue moon.
The Disappearance of Willie Bingham, directed by Matt Richards.
Mr. Bingham gave up a kidney and a lung. Organs from inmates provide a small but steady revenue stream for our now privatised penal system.
Drops, directed by Sergio Morciello. The Smiling Man, directed by A.J. Briones. Into the Mud, directed by Pablo Pastor. And Vicious, directed by Oliver Park. Now, Vicious, that was one that was actually included on Strange Events. So now we have had this short film in two different films. But of Strange Events, that was the one, the standout one. That was the one that I said, if you're going to watch it, that's the reason to do it. But it wasn't good enough in terms of the entirety of the film to sit down. I just basically told somebody, it's like this one segment wasn't enough to devote an entire rental fee or an entire hour and a half of a time commitment. Just go to YouTube and watch it. But I think that all of these movies included in Nightmare Radio are worth it. And it does make enough of a cohesive package that I actually enjoyed and advocate for the watching of the entire thing. So it's more, somehow more, than just a YouTube cultivated playlist. It does a decent job with the binding storyline. Not phenomenal. This is not going to be an award winner. This is not going to be the best of 2019, 2020. But it's good. It's good in an area that I thought it would be crap. Just based on past history with movies of this ilk, I thought it would be lazy, lackluster shit. And the fact is, it's not. It has effort behind it, both in the binding storyline and in the selection of the short films. It was decent. And I really I can't believe I'm saying this, but I recommend it. So let's go ahead and get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And be it anthology or compilation or what have you, either from Watch If You Dare all the way to Southbound, and all the gamut in between. It's difficult to give ratings on these type of movies because you kind of have to weigh all of the segments and come up with an average line, a median line. And that's what I've attempted to do here. So the plot of this, I would say that is average, but slightly better than average. So 16 out of 25 there. I think that's about right. Average being about 13, 14 or so. But the intent is where this shines, because this was intending to be something of, well, again, just a compilation horror that was designed to scare and delight the masses, and against everything that I felt in the first place, it actually managed to achieve it. I had my expectations, which were remarkably low, and they were blown out of the water. So 21 out of 25 on the intent there. I didn't think that would be happening. Acting, 16 out of 25. We are kind of dealing with short films, which means we are typically dealing with low budgets, which means we are dealing with green actors. Let's just be honest. And the DJ in the Nightmare Radio storyline, not bad, but the dialogue delivery was pretty one note. And typically when we have a DJ that revels in the macabre, it's not one note. But the technical was another area in which I was a bit flabbergasted because it had some good technical prowess to it. The camera work in all the segments was pretty decent. Some of the special effects were astoundingly good. I really don't have a whole lot of technical complaints there. Again, we're dealing with short films. We're dealing with a little stuff that's a little bit green, but forgivable overall. Any of the mistakes and Mars and so forth, it affects the score. Of course it affects the score, but still forgivable, and it doesn't just take away from the watch at all. Certainly not enough to affect the intent score. So at some point I did have to wonder whether or not I was talking out of my ass and spewing bullshit. I had a reasonable assumption about how these movies were actually made and cultivated, but that's just what they were, was an assumption at the end of the day. So what I did was I reached out to the common denominator here of Oliver Park, the director of Vicious, the man who had his short film featured in 2 of these that I've watched and reviewed now. And I basically asked him, what was your involvement in this? He was very happy to talk to me. We had some emails back and forth. Very delightful guy. I did ask him, what is your level of participation in this? How did this come to be? And he confirmed what I was thinking. He said that he made Vicious. It made the festival circuits. It was just kind of, it had gotten the accolades that it was needed, or that he was hoping for. It was well received. He put it up on, when it was done with the festivals, he put it up on YouTube, and then he was contacted from the producers of these 2 films about including it in their compilation. And that's pretty much the end of his involvement in them. That's ultimately what these are. And personally, if I had to pick between the 2, I would say I absolutely prefer anthologies. I prefer movies of the Amicus ilk, or movies like Southbound or Creepshow, where that's how they were designed from the get-go. But if you're going to make a compilation movie, don't half-ass it. Pick your shorts well. If you're going to have a binding storyline, put some effort behind it. Put some dialogue behind it. Put some interesting thought and maybe a few little chills and frights behind it. And when you do, you're going to have a finished product that I can sit here behind my camera and my microphone and advocate for people to watch it, just like I'm doing right now for A Night of Horror, Nightmare Radio. So thank you very much. That should about do it. That's my review, a total of 72 out of 100 points. Thank you very, very much for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you at my next review. If you like this video, please click like, subscribe, and click that bell. And if you want to support me further, my Patreon and my merchandise storefront links are below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.